Ahoy, my friends. It's your old buddy Doc back again with another story time for you. And tonight we have a special year-end edition. Since New Year's Eve will be upon us in just a few days, I definitely wanted to do a special story as a thank you to all of you who have joined me over the years, and especially this past year, reading stories each week for you. And I have definitely had fun and enjoyed all the stories we've gotten to visit. And who knows at what stories may lie in the future. But tonight we have Captain LaPlank, the perfect pirate. And this one is done by Flibber T. Gibbet and illustrated by Rob Foote. And definitely looking forward to this story. So what do you say we go ahead and let's begin. The pirate LaPlank was strict on his ship, that he never forgave a mistake or a slip. He expected perfection, no ifs, ands, or buts. When it came to mistakes, even one made him nuts. The captain had kind of high standards for crew. If he could be perfect, then they could be too. All his crew had to do was to do as he did, since a single mistake meant him blowing his lid. Well, sounds like he's rather short-tempered. At the sight of his ship, other pirates would flip and decide it was wise to steer clear of his grip. From Big Booty Bay, the whole way to Cave Cove, he'd clear out the waters wherever he drove. He would soak any folks he caught beaching asleep, and light up his cannons at night like a creep. And so he'd been chosen, some say out of fear, as Lake Buccaneer's Buccaneer of the Year. Doesn't sound like a nice pirate. Let's see what happens. With his ship now equipped, he climbed up on a box that he liked to stand up on to heighten his talks. He called for his crew. They were new to the ship, so he laid down the law before launching the trip. "For treasure we sail," said LaPlank with a grin. "But let me say something before we begin. I'm not much for mistakes, and I mean that sincerely. Any pirate who makes one will pay for it dearly." Well, he grabbed a long board from the deck with a yank and fixed it in place on his ship as a plank. His pirates each took a quick step to the rear, since planks can be rather unsafe to be near. "So you're eager to leave," said LaPlank to his crew. "But the ship doesn't move till inspection is through. Now return to your spots. Fear nothing to fear, except for mistakes, to be painfully clear." Kind of hung up on that mistake thing. They did as he ordered. Then he took a minute to look in his chest and review what was in it. He gave a great grunt before closing the chest and commencing inspection with plenty of zest. You'll have to check your work. He checked on the masts. He checked on the sails. But that was not all. He got down to details. He checked every knot. Then he checked every line by tugging and pulling, but found they were fine. He checked every cannon. He checked every ball. He checked every pistol, but that was not all. He checked every barrel. He checked every sack. He checked every flag to make sure it was black. Fine crew so far. The crew watched him work. When he spots a mistake, the suspense grew more tense than lake pirates could take. They bit at their fingers. They sucked on their thumbs. They screamed for no reason. They called for their mums. But Captain LaPlank went on checking and checking, without much concern for whose nerves he was wrecking. Until at long last there was nothing unchecked. And he had to admit it. Why, things were correct. Well done, crew. Good job. He called for his pirates. He told them, well done. I could find no mistake, 'cause in fact there were none. His crew then let loose with much hooting and squealing, and even some tears at the cheer they were feeling. Ahoy, said LaPlank. That old west wind is blowing. So don't you suppose it's time to get going? Make sail, he commanded. He brandished his sword and ran back and forth while his pirates rip-roared. They're ready for their adventure. They sprang to the anchor and cranked it up fast and set every sail into place on its mast as the piper performed for the pirates at work, while twirling and dancing and acting berserk. The sails filled with wind, the mainmast made a creak, and their ship zipped away from the bay like a streak, while his crew at their posts did their duty so well that the captain felt happy, though no one must tell. It's good when the crew is together like that. The weather was splendid. They sailed in the sun, and there weren't any blunders, except for the one. LaPlank was astounded. He found it concerning. His sniffer could whiff it. The burgers were burning. He turned to the cook, and the look that he gave him soon made it clear now nothing could save him. Oh no. Our captain gets like that sometimes. Mistake! Cried the captain. He threw down his hat, and the trampling he gave it soon made that hat flat. The cook looked around. He decided to hide, but barrels are narrow while pirates are wide. To the plank, said the captain. He captured the cook and booted his bottom each step that he took. They stood at the plank. Would the cook be corrected? The captain glanced down at the chest he's inspected. My captain doesn't act quite that bad. He doesn't like mistakes, but he lifted the lid, and inside there were vests, which every fine captain provides for their guests. He took the cook's coat and a hat from his head, and then he let him a vest to go floating instead. Kerplunk, he was dunked, and then left here to bob, which is no way to go your first day on the job. The crew was afraid. They had shivers and shook, and shed some tears at the canning of cook. Oh my. Maybe a bit of an overreaction. Enough of mistakes, called the captain to crew, who returned to their duties as crewmen will do. The weather stayed splendid. They sailed in the sun, and there were no more blunders. Except for the one. Oh no. LaPlank was astounded. He frowned at the deck. It should have been spotless, but there was a speck. The swabby's top job was to keep the ship clean, and specks on the deck made the captain get mean. "Mistake!" cried the captain. The swabby said sorry, but his boss wasn't fond of his sorry starry. From his chest he selected a vest from on top, which he handed the swabby instead of his mop. Oh no. Kerplunk, he was dunked. Then the ship sailed away, and he shrank to a speck in the rear view display. Enough of mistakes, called the captain to crew, who returned to their duties as crewmen will do. The weather stayed splendid. They sailed in the sun, and there were no more blunders. Except for the one. LaPlank was astounded. To starboard, he said. So why was the ship of his porting instead? He yelled for his helmsman, whose duty was steering, who wore a big horn in each ear for his hearing. "Mistake!" cried the captain. His helmsman said, "Sonny," which his boss did not hold on the whole to be funny. He unhorned his helmsman like that in a flash, and then he lent him a vest of his to help soften his splash. Kerplunk, he was dunked, and then left there to simmer, for the helmsman was not a strong long-distance swimmer. Enough of mistakes, called the captain to crew, who returned to their duties as crewmen will do. It's a lot of sailors they're going through. But the blunders kept coming. Their numbers grew bigger. He was giving out vests to the crew with some vigor. Kerplunk, they were dunked. Some may find this surprising, but it looked like the lake may have actually been rising. The pirates all tried not to anger LaPlank, but their minor mistakes made the captain a crank. His crew he'd all booted, excluding the piper, who had grown so scared he was wearing a diaper. That's pretty scared. But his piping was perfect. He'd nothing to dread, except that the captain kept losing his head. The captain looked frantic. He'd far too much work, after booting his crew like some kind of jerk. He did all the cooking, the cleaning, and steering, in a fearsome display of extreme buccaneering. His new problem was jobs. He'd had rather too many. But then, where was the fun? He was not having any. That's because he got rid of all of his crew for minor things. While the captain was acting as crew for his ship, the piper's fine fingers just happened to slip. The piper fell silent while over the boat. There rang out a sound of a slightly wrong note. "Mistake!" cried the captain, unlatching that chest, before reaching inside to retrieve him a vest. When his fingers found nothing inside except air, all the captain could do was bend down and stare. Well, that's odd. It's not supposed to be empty yet, is it? His stomach did cartwheels. His heart hopped a beat. And his shoulders dipped so low they touched both his feet. The poor piper kept quiet while the tension now mounted. That the chest was infested because the captain miscounted. He'd blundered their numbers like some kind of dummy, which must have been why all his feelings were crummy. A disaster has happened on Buccaneer Lake. The mad captain himself had just made a mistake. No way. In the midst of his madness, the captain stopped short, for he thought up some notion that brought up a snort. All the bunglers before were now very much wetter, for the captain had called for his crew to do better. But he hadn't himself, which soon set him to thinking. What happens to captains when they do the stinking? What rot, LaPlank thought. A ship's captain misacting? It was the crew who made boo-boos, not a captain's exacting. His confusion now grew. Are you captain or chump? He asked of himself as he scratched at his stump. So he thought without stopping. Smoke shot out each ear, till the facts of the matter at last became clear. It had nothing to do with ship captains or crews. Perfection's not something that pirates can choose. They bungled their business, but those are the breaks. Mistakes are just something that everyone makes. I think he's getting it now. Uh-oh, said LaPlank. He looked over his ship, which has shedded more pirates the longer the trip. LaPlank looked around at those empty old decks and considered perfection's less pleasant effects. He's starting to get it. Wonder what he'll do about it. Reverse course, LaPlank ordered. He snapped a salute and whipped his ship round to shoot back up their route. He rescued his crew. Then he cooked them some cocoa and promised mistakes wouldn't make him go loco. There you go. And that oath was no joke. The mad captain had changed from that prickly old stickler who'd grown so deranged. Deck specks and burnt burgers still happen sometimes, but mistakes of all kinds did not rate as great crimes. He'd shrug and remind them that those are the breaks. Mistakes are just something that everyone makes. And that nasty old plank, it was now much adored, for it found a new use as a high diving board. and off he went to dive. Seems like Captain LaPlank learned a very, very valuable lesson about asking for more from others than you expect from yourself. And it's true, everyone will make mistakes, and it's just in how we deal with them. Mistakes will happen, and that's perfectly fine. It's part of learning and growing. And that's why LaPlank learned that, hey, it's not a great crime to do something wrong. It's all in how we handle it. And he learned his lesson, and he went back and he picked up his entire crew, and everybody got a much happier time out of it. And hopefully you will too. And you will understand that mistakes will happen to you sometimes as well. And it's all in how you deal with it. You know what? You take the mistake and you learn from it and you grow. And so I hope that that's a lesson for this year and next year and every year, that it's okay to learn and to grow and to make mistakes. And this past year has probably been many, many mistakes that you've made. And I know I've made quite a few. And I'm happy to correct them in any way I can. And hopefully you have learned many lessons along the way. And who knows what the next year will hold in the way of lessons that you will learn and adventures that you will go on. So I would like to thank you again for joining me, not only tonight, but for over this entire year and all the stories we've had a chance to spend time together. And I hope that you have a very happy and joyous new year, not only from myself, but from the entire crew of the Pirates of Fortune's Folly. And I will see you next time. Until then, be well.